How many people actually have good relationships with their mother-in-law? I've often wondered about that, given my rocky relationship with my mother-in-law, Mary. Don't get me wrong, I never disliked Mary. In fact, I always wanted to get along with her. But from the very beginning of our marriage, Mary has been bending my intentions out of shape. My husband and I got married 4 years ago. We met through mutual friends and hit it off right away, starting to date. On our 3rd anniversary, he proposed. He's not much of a talker, but he's always been kind and calming, a real rock for me. So when he proposed, there was no hesitation. I said yes, and we happily tied the knot. As for my father-in-law and mother-in-law, I never had any particular thoughts about them. During family meetings, our conversations were always pleasant. No snide comments or anything. I figured we'd just keep a healthy distance and get along fine. Then came our first Christmas after getting married, and that's when the drama started. At the time, I was pregnant with our daughter. While I wasn't showing much yet, I was trying to take it easy because it was my first pregnancy. But when we arrived at my in-laws' house for the holidays, Mary immediately put me to work preparing the Christmas dinner. My husband was busy drinking with my father-in-law, Bob, and didn't notice how I was being treated. Mary had me cooking, cleaning, and running around nonstop. When I tried to rest because of the baby, she would say, "What are you doing just sitting there? You need to know your place. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can slack off." She would force me back to my feet and keep ordering me around. I followed all her instructions, yet the next set of orders came instantly. So much for relaxing during the holiday break. I never expected our first visit to the in-laws' house to be this exhausting. By the time we got back in the car, I was completely drained. My husband should have noticed what was happening between Mary and me, and it frustrated me that he didn't seem to care. But he had been enjoying his time talking and drinking with Bob, so maybe he just wasn't paying attention to me. I couldn't bring myself to confront him about it. After that, our daughter was born, and during the following summer, we went to my parents' house. My parents live about an hour away from our apartment, just like my in-laws, so we visit them every few months. However, Christmas at the in-laws became an annual tradition. But the pressure to visit them more often increased after our daughter was born. It might just be because they want to see her, but for me, it's been a source of stress. Every time I go to the in-laws, I know I won't be able to relax, and Mary will always have some sort of task for me. I knew all too well what I was getting into, and if it were up to me, I wouldn't have gone. But my daughter was still young, and I couldn't just leave her behind. My husband, as clueless as ever, didn't seem to notice that Mary was making my life miserable. The only one who seemed to get it was Bob, but he's practically invisible at the in-laws' house. He never says anything to Mary. Mary knows this, so she doesn't openly harass me when my husband is around. But if Bob is there, she'll make snide remarks. On top of that, she has me prepare meals and then serve them, only to my husband and Bob saying, "We'll eat later. We have chores to do." Then she eats in the kitchen, leaving nothing for me. If a situation arises where we all have to sit at the table, she'll eat my portion of the side dishes and say, "Emma, you said you didn't like this, remember?" Saying so, she didn't give me a side dish. My husband will just genuinely look surprised and say, "Oh, you didn't like it?" I'm just genuinely surprised. Mary turns to him and says, "See, you have to keep track. Emma is so picky." Which is nonsense. I'm not particularly picky, and I generally eat what's given to me. But dealing with Mary's subtle harassment had started to feel tiresome. I'd only managed to eat one meal during a 2-night stay. Such things were commonplace. It had gotten so routine that I started bringing my own emergency snacks like sweetbread and cookies whenever I'd go to the in-laws' house. I would just eat them in the kitchen afterwards since no meal was prepared for me anyway. Seeing this, Mary says, "Isn't it a bit much to bring your own food? Shouldn't a daughter-in-law show some restraint?" She mocked me. But by then, I had learned to tune her out to some extent. Sure, it still irritated me, but I no longer felt like a failure as a daughter-in-law. This continued for several years after my daughter was born, and by the 5th year of our marriage, I was pregnant with our second child. We went to the in-laws' house for Christmas that year, as is customary. But for some reason, my husband was acting a bit strange this time. As soon as we arrived at the in-laws' house, Mary was on me as usual. "Emma, can you help with the Christmas dinner?" That's what I was told. Knowing that helping really meant doing it all myself, I simply said, "All right." Just then, my husband, who usually starts drinking with Bob right away, seemed to have been listening to our conversation. "No, Emma can sit. Mom, Emma is pregnant with our second child," he kindly said. Even so, when I tried to speak, my husband sharply snapped, "Just sit down," he yelled. I was shocked to see him so furious. It was unlike his usual calm demeanor. However, just as I was about to sit, Mary chimed in. "Look, things go faster when women handle these tasks. Emma helps me every month, so just sit down, okay? Come on, Emma." Unable to do anything else, I ended up being bossed around by Mary as usual. But today was different. My husband seemed off. As we headed to the kitchen, my husband followed. Upon arriving, he asked, "Mom, where's Emma going to sit? You're going to help too, right?" Mary quickly fetched a chair and set it in front of me, saying, "Here, sit down, Emma. You're pregnant after all." She was uncharacteristically kind. All the while, my husband just stood there, silently observing. Although he didn't interfere, he watched us intently. But Mary grew restless and tried to get my husband out of the room by suggesting, "Why don't you go have a drink with Dad?" My husband, however, didn't budge. Our daughter's fussing caught Mary's attention. "Listen, Betty's crying. Go soothe her." Finally, my husband left the kitchen. Immediately, Mary sighed and said, "Oh, I'm tired. Emma, just finish the rest yourself. Stand up. Pregnancy isn't an illness." She snatched the chair from me and sat down. But Mary's relief was short-lived. My husband returned carrying our daughter. Mary, caught off guard, tried to stand up and ended up falling with the chair. My husband glared at her. "Why are you sitting, Mom, while Emma is standing?" he said in a cold voice. Frantically, Mary answered, "Oh, my back just started hurting a bit. I just switched places for a second." She hurriedly returned the chair to me. Thanks to my husband's supervision, Mary actually helped with the Christmas dinner prep, and we finished in half the usual time. Still, my husband remarked, "This was much quicker than usual, even though you both should be working on this every year." He made such a mysterious comment. Mary, without replying, simply said, "I'm going to start preparing dinner. Why don't you go to the living room with Betty?" She tried to smile as she said this, but her son didn't budge an inch. Instead, he said, "Mom, why don't you want me in here? Is there something you're trying to hide?" Mary was clearly flustered, but managed to stammer, "No, not really." Then he sighed and said, "Call me if you need anything," and returned to the living room with our daughter. Once she confirmed he had left, Mary shot me a glare. "Did you say something to John?" I was equally surprised. I never thought my husband would behave like this. "I haven't said anything. I don't know what you're talking about." Exhaling a sigh, Mary said, "Fine, whatever. After dinner, you'll be cleaning upstairs. You know the drill. You do it every year." After that, I prepared dinner, and as usual, Mary served my husband, Bob, and herself first. But today was different. My husband insisted. We won't eat until Emma joins us, thwarting Mary's plan, so we all ended up eating together. He kept adding more side dishes to my plate. Emma, you're pregnant. You need to eat well. Usually Mary would give me less food, assuming I disliked certain dishes, but she couldn't intervene this time. Emma, are you sure you like that? You don't have to force yourself to eat. She tried to snatch the dish away from me. No, Emma eats what she's given. It's better for the baby if she doesn't have food preferences, my husband said, so Mary couldn't say anything more. After dinner, I usually do the dishes by myself, but this time my husband stepped in. I'll do it today, Emma. You sit down. He grabbed the dishes from me and headed to the kitchen. Seeing this, Mary whispered, Letting John do that. You're a failure of a daughter-in-law. Go clean the upstairs. That's what she said to me in a whisper. As much as I didn't want to share a space with Mary, I was about to head upstairs when my husband stopped me. Emma, where are you going? I didn't know how to respond, and before I could say anything, he seriously asked, Did Mom tell you to do something? No. Before I could say more, he took my hand and led me back to the living room. He looked angrier than I had ever seen him before. Then, in front of Mary and Bob, he began to speak. I misunderstood because Emma didn't say anything. I thought she was getting along with Mom. Mary looked shocked at his words. What have you been doing to Emma, Mom? He asked. Looking flustered, Mary responded. What are you talking about? Emma and I get along just fine, right, Emma? She looked at me, seeking agreement. Well, about that. Before I could elaborate, my husband spoke again. Every time we come back from visiting here, I notice Emma looking down. I was concerned but didn't press because you always seem cheerful, Mom. You haven't been harassing Emma, have you? Mary's face flushed with anger. I haven't done any such thing. Emma, did you say something unnecessary? She lunged at me, but my husband intervened. Enough, he shouted. I've always been treated well by Emma's parents, so I assumed you were kind to her as well, Mom. But Emma looks miserable every time we come back here. It's true that being at my parents' house might make her feel a bit uncomfortable, but that goes both ways. Yet I have never felt unhappy when I'm at her parents' place. They're really good people. My husband's eyes were filled with tears. Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but tear up too. My husband looked at Mary, who was visibly uncomfortable, and said, Mom, can you really face Emma's parents like this? Can you honestly say you treat Emma well? Just then, Bob stood up and apologized to us. I'm sorry, Emma. I also noticed that Mary had been distant with you, but I didn't say anything. I'm equally at fault. I'm truly sorry. Hearing this, my husband turned to Mary. Mom, you should apologize to Emma too. While saying sorry won't fix everything, it's a start. But Mary wouldn't even look at me, let alone apologize. Seeing this, my husband sighed deeply and said, If that's how it's going to be, Mom, then fine. We won't be coming back to this house ever again. Mary looked shocked. That's not fair, is it? She pleaded. Ignoring her, my husband began packing our things. Mary started sobbing uncontrollably. But no one, not even Bob, comforted her. Let's go, Emma, my husband said, picking up our daughter and calling me. Mary collapsed on the floor, crying, and Bob just sat there, head down. In that awkward atmosphere, we left my in-laws' house. Ever since, Mary has tried to call my husband multiple times, but he's blocked her number. He's cut off all ties with his parents' home and hasn't been back. Instead, we've been visiting my parents more frequently. At first, my parents were puzzled by our increased visits, but they welcomed us warmly each time. My husband often says, Emma's parents are truly wonderful people. I think he feels guilty for the tough times I endured at his parents' home, but I'm not concerned anymore. I have no stress now that we've stopped going there. In the end, I owe my current happiness to my husband's actions back then. I'm truly grateful. From now on, I want to create many happy memories with my husband, our daughter, and my parents, and continue to walk a happy path in life.
My name is Alice, 28 years old. I work in childcare. Recently, I got engaged to my boyfriend Tom, and I've come to visit his parents' house for the first time. Tom is a graduate of a prestigious university and works for a renowned company. Not only is he smart, but he also has the respect of his colleagues. I've always admired him as a person. His father welcomed our marriage, even saying, "We never had a daughter. Your future mother-in-law will be thrilled." However, I've been bothered by the fact that my future mother-in-law, sitting next to him, seems upset. She's grimacing, almost as if she's angry. While I was observing her, she suddenly asked, "I heard you didn't graduate high school. Is that true? Our Tom is an elite, having graduated from a famous university. You think I'd approve of a marriage between an elite and someone of your status?" I was taken aback when she started to insult me. "Mother-in-law, how can you say such things? You're being rude to Alice." "Exactly, Mom. Your educational background shouldn't matter." Both Tom and his father stood up for me against my future mother-in-law. However, this only seemed to upset my future mother-in-law more. Isn't it natural for a mother to be concerned about the education and occupation of her son's future spouse? Children inherit their mother's DNA, don't they? Don't I want to leave behind excellent genes? It seemed like my mother-in-law wasn't going to approve of me, a high school dropout, because she wanted to ensure the excellence of her offspring. While it's true that some people are obsessed with educational backgrounds, and many parents care deeply about education, it felt sad to be opposed solely because I dropped out of high school. Actually, there was a reason I didn't finish high school. I grew up in a single-parent home after my father died in a traffic accident. My mother was frail, and she had a hard time raising me and my twin sister, Emma. Wanting to alleviate my mother's burden, I started working after middle school. Now, I'm attending night school to get my high school diploma. I'm saving up money, and I can even go to college if I want. Tom is supportive of this, and he even offered to help pay for my college education. Tom understands my home environment, and if I want it, he will pay for my college expenses. Tom is such a kind person, and that's one of the reasons I decided to marry him. But my future mother-in-law seems to dislike this. Tom is an only child, so we will be living with his parents in the future, but I'm a little worried about how that will work out. A while later, I moved into my future in-laws' house. At this point, there was only a month left until our wedding. As the wedding day approached, I had to make more trips to the wedding venue for final checks. I had to make sure to reserve hotels for our guests who would be coming from afar. Between work, school, and wedding preparations, I was very busy. But my mother-in-law didn't seem too pleased with how I was. Today, I was applying makeup to head to the venue, and she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what on earth are you wearing?" My mother-in-law, catching sight of my outfit, had blurted it out loud. "I'm about to head to the venue, so I thought I'd dress up." Whether she was displeased with me dressing up to go to the venue, or just seizing the opportunity to berate me, I couldn't say. "Huh! You say you're going to the venue, but you're just dressing like that to attract men, aren't you? You're such a careless woman." She just decided I was meeting a man instead of going to the venue. I was at a loss for words. I told her I was meeting Tom at the venue, and if she had doubts, she could ask him, but she just assumed I was meeting a man. Then, the next moment, my mother-in-law did something outrageous. She messed up my carefully styled hair. "Hey, what are you doing, mother-in-law? I spent so much time getting ready. This is terrible." With my hair a mess, I couldn't go out and had to fix it. But seeing my disheveled hair, my mother-in-law cheerfully said, "There's no need to fix it. This hairstyle suits a high school dropout, poor woman like you. You should wear your hair like this for the wedding." Since I was already running late, I quickly fixed my hair and headed to the venue where Tom was waiting. Tom was waiting for me at the entrance of the venue and seemed concerned about my downcast expression. I was torn whether to tell him what happened earlier, but I thought it wasn't good to talk about something so depressing when we were about to discuss the ceremony, so I decided not to tell Tom at that time. One day, when it was almost time for the wedding, my mother-in-law suddenly made this suggestion. Hey, Alice's mom lives far away, doesn't she? It must be tough for her to come, and she'll have to pay for her hotel. So why doesn't she stay at our house? Tom and I were both surprised by my mother-in-law's sudden proposal. Indeed, if we could save on hotel costs, my mother would be happy, and it would also facilitate interaction between our families. Tom suggested I ask my mother about mother-in-law's proposal, so I asked her right away. My mother was very pleased with mother-in-law's proposal, and it was decided that my twin sister Emma would also come that day. I initially thought that mother-in-law was making the suggestion out of goodwill, but I could never have imagined the outrageous things she would do next. The day before the wedding, my mother and sister came to stay at my in-laws' house. Seeing my mother and sister, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, made me very happy. I have a particularly close relationship with my sister, and we were so happy to see each other after a long time that we decided to sleep together that night. Emma, who had been drinking, fell asleep right away. No matter what happens, Emma won't wake up once she's like this. Just when I was thinking that, it was getting late, and I should get some sleep too. I suddenly felt the door to our room open. As I was wondering what it could be, I heard a loud buzzing sound, followed by the noise of something being shaved. Haha! Now you won't be able to attend tomorrow's ceremony, will you? No need for hair for a poor middle school dropout. The moment I heard that, shocked, I turned on the room lights and said, Mother-in-law, what are you doing? The person in the bed suddenly sat up, startling my mother-in-law as well. Huh? Mother-in-law? You're Alice, aren't you? She seemed to have mistaken me for Emma. That's not my hair. We're twins, and our faces really look alike, but it wasn't me whose hair was shaved with clippers. It was my sister Emma. What? No way. Why? Wasn't it Alice? My mother-in-law seemed to be in shock, but Emma, who had apparently drunk too much, was sound asleep. When she wakes up in the morning and realizes her hair has been shaved off, Emma will surely be very angry. Unlike me, Emma has a strong temperament, so it's obvious she'll be furious. What will you do now, mother-in-law? I'm not going to cover for you. Feeling guilty, perhaps, my mother-in-law left the room with a pale face. The next day, Emma looked in the mirror and was shocked and furious to find that she was bald. Our mother, who was present at the scene, also shed tears in shock, and Tom could not hide his disturbance. It's terrible! Who on earth did this? So I revealed everything that had happened yesterday in front of everyone. I was wondering what kind of face my mother-in-law would wake up with this morning, but she wasn't there. According to my father-in-law, she said she was going for an early morning walk and hadn't returned yet. I thought she had run away, so I revealed everything to our relatives and decided to search for mother-in-law. About 30 minutes later, I got a call from a relative saying they had found her in a nearby convenience store, and my father-in-law headed for that store. My mother-in-law, who had no idea she was being searched for, full of excuses as soon as she came home. I didn't do anything. It's all Alice's fault. Alice used the clippers on her own and cleanly shaved off Emma's hair while she was sleeping next to her. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was trying to pin the blame on me. This shocked me, and I couldn't help but retort. Don't be ridiculous. I didn't do anything. Wasn't it you who came into the room yesterday? It's terrible that you're still lying at this point. But even so, my mother-in-law was reluctant to admit her guilt. Then my father-in-law, as if he had remembered something, went outside and came back with something. Alice, could this be the clipper? Looking at the clipper father-in-law was holding, it was undoubtedly the one mother-in-law used last night to shear off Emma's hair. That's it! That's the clipper! But where was it? It seems this clipper originally belonged to father-in-law, who was always concerned about his appearance and always carried grooming tools with him. When they went to the car, the bag containing his grooming tools was ransacked, and the clipper was the only thing missing. I always leave my car keys in the bedroom. If there's brown hair in this clipper, it's definite that the culprit is your mom. Saying that, father-in-law started to dismantle the clipper. Inside the clipper was brown hair, undoubtedly Emma's. It must have been because she had to rush out in the dark. She couldn't properly dispose of the hair inside. Shown the remaining hair, mother-in-law collapsed to her knees. Alice, it's your fault! Despite being a middle school dropout and poor, you deceived smart Tom. I wanted you to give up on Tom at all costs. I became disgusted at mother-in-law's selfish words. The one who got angriest upon hearing that was Emma, whose hair had been shaven off. I don't care about your circumstances. What are you going to do about this? I can't attend the wedding like this. Hearing Emma's complaint, father-in-law made a call somewhere. His acquaintance, who was a hairdresser, agreed to rush over with a wig right away. This would temporarily solve Emma's hair problem, but they couldn't just leave mother-in-law as is. 30 minutes later, father-in-law's friend arrived with the wig, and Emma's hair was now beautiful. At first, father-in-law thought about shaving mother-in-law's hair just like he did with Emma, but it didn't feel satisfying. So he decided to expose mother-in-law's wrongdoing in front of everyone. Among the attendees called today were landlords who mother-in-law's parents had been indebted to for generations. They seemed to get along with father-in-law, and hearing about this incident would undoubtedly impact mother-in-law's parents' house. This is because the landlord, who was close friends with them, has been giving them a discount on their apartment rent. The landlord is a very righteous person, and would surely return the rent to its original price once he learns what mother-in-law has done. Worst case scenario, he might even evict them from the apartment. Mother-in-law's parents are poor and have no money. If they were to be evicted, they would surely come to mother-in-law's place. But I had heard from Tom before that mother-in-law didn't get along with her parents and wouldn't even care for them. Living with her parents would undoubtedly be the beginning of hell for mother-in-law. Wait, please. I'll be in trouble if you do that. I'm sorry. It was my fault. I got carried away and did such a thing. I'm sorry, Emma. I'll pay you damages, so please forgive me. Mother-in-law kept apologizing repeatedly to the point of rubbing her forehead against the floor. But even with apologies, Emma's hair will not come back. After discussion, it was decided that father-in-law and Tom would reveal the wrongdoings of mother-in-law. Of course, Emma has already agreed to this. Mother-in-law said she didn't want to go to the wedding and tried to run away, but she couldn't because Emma and Tom held her back. Upon arrival at the venue, relatives who knew the situation through messages came to us looking very worried. We exposed mother-in-law's wrongdoing in front of the relatives, and Emma took off her wig and showed her bald head. Everyone was shocked by Emma's condition, especially the women, kept saying they couldn't believe it. Hair for a woman is like a lifeline. Imagine the shock of having it suddenly shaved off with a clipper. Thinking of Emma, some people were in tears. Then, as expected, the landlord came to mother-in-law and asked if what happened was true. At first, mother-in-law tried to deceive him, but father-in-law urged her to tell the truth, and she finally confessed. The landlord, flushed with anger, was also accused by the woman. After that, mother-in-law remained downcast during the ceremony, which was unimaginable from her usually spirited self. The wedding itself ended smoothly, and it was a great joy to be blessed by many people. However, we can no longer live with mother-in-law in that house. It's only natural, but we decided to move into an apartment and live as a couple. Mother-in-law was panicked about us leaving the house. She cried out that it was her fault and begged us not to leave, but we can't live with her. But father-in-law felt the same. He told mother-in-law that he was going to divorce her and asked her to leave the house. Mother-in-law turned pale and clung to father-in-law, saying, "Please reconsider. Where will I live if I leave this house? You know, don't you, that I'm not getting along with my parents. If they find out about the divorce, they'll definitely tell me to come back for their care." She was trembling as if she could collapse at any moment. But when I think about Emma, I don't care about mother-in-law. I never dreamed that my hair would be shaved off while I was sleeping and mistaken for me. Mother-in-law persistently tried to persuade us afterwards, but since father-in-law contacted mother-in-law's parents, she reluctantly left the house. Currently, mother-in-law is living with her estranged parents and seems to be taking care of them. But apparently, her parents have a difficult personality, and mother-in-law is being completely worn out by their selfishness. She has called us several times to say she wants to start over, but we have no intention of living with her, so we just blocked her calls. Now, we are living happily with father-in-law in his home. The house was quite old, so we decided to renovate it together. Father-in-law built his dream study. Tom created a place to display model figures, and I decided to install a state-of-the-art kitchen. Of course, we also created a room for the child who will be born in the future, and now the three of us are living comfortably. Emma's hair, which was shaved at that time, has now become short, and it seems to be highly rated by her friends as a good change of image. She talks about that time as if it were a joke, telling various friends, and it actually complicates my feelings more. Emma, for her part, occasionally comes over for sleepovers at our family home, and I look forward to that. There may be many difficulties in the future, but I believe we can all work together and push through.
You're running a lunchbox shop that's beneath our family status. You're an embarrassment, so you won't be attending the wedding. At a family meeting with my son, who's engaged to the CEO's daughter, I was hit with these unexpected words. My late husband Joseph's cherished shop was belittled, and I was told I couldn't attend my beloved son's wedding. I couldn't accept it, but if it's for my son's sake, I had no choice. I can't ruin my son's marriage because of me. I want him to be happy. Reluctantly, I agreed to their terms. But then, an unexpected person showed up, leaving the other parents pale-faced. "Richard, take care of Mom for me," Joseph had said with a smile as he took his last breath. I thought we had so much more time. We had promised to make people smile through our cooking. Growing up, my parents were always busy, so I naturally started making dinner. I'd cook, wrap up the leftovers, and go to bed. In the morning, the dishes were always clean, and a thank you note was left. I wanted to make my parents happy, so I got into cooking. Joseph was passionate and dreamed of owning his own restaurant. I was drawn to his enthusiasm and effort toward his dream, so we started dating. Cooking for Joseph, who aspired to be a chef, was nerve-wracking. One day he said, "Nancy, let's open a shop together. Your cooking has the magic to make people smile, and I'm one of them. Let's make people smile together." Hearing that, I remembered my past efforts to please my parents and decided to run a homey lunchbox shop with Joseph. I handled mornings. Joseph took care of nights. Joseph would always say thank you after meals. "Gratitude needs to be expressed," he'd say, a phrase that still rings in my ears. After giving birth to Richard, life was tough, but fulfilling. Joseph passed away before fulfilling his dream. Richard grew up fast, and I did my best not to let him see my sorrow. He's a thoughtful, kind child who even helps with chores. He loves my cooking and even started cooking himself. When he got a job, he cooked a special meal to thank me. Even after moving out, he occasionally visits to check on me. Recently, Richard said he'd cook another special meal. What's the occasion? He'd often cook, but special meals were rare since he got his job. As we sat down to eat his delicious cooking, Richard said, "Mom, I'm marrying Patricia." I knew Patricia, his warm-hearted coworker, and felt they were a good match. "That's wonderful. Make her happy, okay?" "Of course. And Mom, I might become the next CEO. Turns out Patricia is the daughter of the CEO of the company where Richard works. They're impressed with Richard's work and see him as a future CEO. When I heard this, I was surprised, but also deeply proud that my son was being recognized. As I prepared to visit Patricia's family before the wedding, I felt sentimental looking back on my life. William Smith and Elizabeth, who greeted us, had nothing but praise for Richard. The table was filled with various dishes, and I could see a private chef busy in the kitchen. Richard is truly exceptional, both in his work and as a person. We can trust him with the future of the company. We always thought Richard and Patricia were a perfect match. We cried tears of joy when we heard they were getting married. We look forward to the future. Richard, a bit shy, firmly declared, I will build a happy home with Patricia. I have something to prepare, so Patricia and I will step out for a moment. They left the room with playful smiles, and I felt a mix of pride and warmth. So, Nancy, when are you planning to quit that lunchbox shop of yours? After they left, I sensed a change in Elizabeth's tone. Quit? I never said I was quitting. Well, it's not like it's making much money. Why keep running such a lunchbox shop? I couldn't believe my ears. Is that lunchbox shop? Why are you saying this? That shop is precious to me and my late husband, Joseph. Well, it's not like you're offering anything special. The Smith family owns a major corporation with hundreds of employees. It's not a good match. We were fine with Richard, but we can't accept that his family runs a small-town lunchbox shop. We thought you were quitting, which is why we moved forward with the wedding plans. I was stunned. I couldn't comprehend what was being said. Or maybe I didn't want to. Was my shop the reason Richard couldn't get married? Why does the scale of our business affect my son's marriage? It's a significant difference, objectively speaking. Elizabeth is right. How can we tell people that the family of our future CEO runs an outdated lunchbox shop? Don't belittle it just because it's a lunchbox shop. Elizabeth snorted at my words and delivered the final blow. Enough! You're an embarrassment to our family with that lunchbox shop. You won't be attending the wedding. Not just the wedding. If you continue the shop, we'll cut ties with Richard as well. Do you intend to hold Richard back? Their words cut deep into my heart. I was overwhelmed with a mix of emptiness and anger. I was just happy that Richard was finding his happiness. He's my pride and joy. Please, let me see him get married, even if it's from the shadows. Why do I have to watch Richard's fine form from the shadows? It was my own words, but to be honest, my brain couldn't keep up with them. I'm sorry, but even if you were in the shadows, Richard and Patricia might find it suspicious. We'll say you had an emergency and couldn't attend. Just then, I started to hear Richard and Patricia's voices as they returned to the room. He'll be back soon. If I just give in to William Smith and Elizabeth's demands, these two can live happily. If I just endure it, everything will work out. If I just... Nancy, what do you think? All right. Sorry for the wait. Here's a gift from us to the three of you. Oh, what a relief! You two prepared such a wonderful gift. I'm so happy. Thank you. I didn't expect you to do something so wonderful. Elizabeth got a music box. President William got a whiskey. And for me, an apron. Patricia suggested the apron, saying you're always cooking delicious meals at the shop. We were worried if you'd like it. Ah, thank you. I'll cherish it. Mom, are you crying that much? Tears wouldn't stop flowing. Richard looked at me, surprised but smiling warmly. This apron will be my last memory. The smiles of Richard and Patricia were deeply etched in my heart. Be happy. On the day of the wedding, I sat on the living room floor, still in my pajamas, without even the energy to turn on the lights. My phone was filled with missed calls from Richard and Patricia. Since that day, I didn't know how to interact with Richard, who was excitedly talking about the wedding. I could only offer him cliched words. I held the apron they gave me tightly. Celebrating their union alone, tears flowing endlessly. The next day, I was awakened by the incessant ringing of the doorbell. I instantly knew it was Richard. And indeed, it was him, and Patricia was with him. On the first day of their new life, they had come all the way to my house. As soon as I opened the door, Richard, unable to hide his anxiety, said, "Mom, what happened? We were worried because we knew you wouldn't forget the wedding. Why didn't you come?" "Nancy, was it something I did?" Their faces were pale, a stark contrast to the happiness they should be feeling. I didn't expect him to make me look like this the day after the wedding. "Mom, please, I need to know." From their expressions, I knew that no amount of sugarcoating would work. "Let's talk. Come in." I told them everything that President William and Elizabeth had said to me when they stepped out. I wondered if it was okay to reveal everything, but I couldn't stop myself. Richard's face gradually tensed up, but Patricia seemed the most shocked. "What is this? How could they say such terrible things to you, Nancy? This is unbelievable." Tears flowed from Patricia's eyes, widened in a mix of anger, sadness, and surprise. "Nancy, I don't know how to apologize for my parents. I'm so sorry." "Stop it, Patricia. You've done nothing wrong. I'm sorry for causing you pain the day after your wedding." "Mom, thank you for telling us." Richard spoke calmly, and with a daze, Patricia left my home. The next day, the doorbell rang again. Could it be Richard? I opened the door to find President William and Elizabeth standing there. "What have you done? Enough of your games!" I was emotionless as I absorbed their angry shouts. "What's the matter? You come here shouting, disturbing the neighbors?" "Disturbing? We're not worried about the neighbors. You've ruined everything." "Seems like you're the ones who've ruined things." "What are you talking about? You must have filled Patricia and Richard's heads with nonsense. Richard even handed in his resignation." "That's right. Patricia is even talking about cutting ties with us. You orchestrated this, didn't you?" I hadn't asked for any of this, nor had I orchestrated anything. Was this what Richard's determined look meant? I was relieved, but also puzzled about how to handle the situation. I simply told them the truth. Don't accuse me of manipulating them. I think they made their own decisions. Stop playing games. I'd like to say the same to you. "What is this? Are you trying to ruin our company?" Just as President William shouted, a car pulled up in front of the house. A sleek, spotless, black luxury car. The door opened and we all gasped. Out stepped Richard, followed by Patricia, and then an elderly gentleman. "Nancy, long time no see. I apologize for the recent rudeness." "Dad, why are you here? Do you know this person?" "Don't ask so many questions. Nancy's father is a successful businessman who runs multiple companies. We owe him a lot. Nancy is also involved in the business as an executive. Didn't you know that?" The elderly gentleman was David Smith, President William's father and Patricia's grandfather, currently serving as the chairman. I had met him at board meetings at my father's company, but it had been a while. President William paled at David's words. "You can't be serious. You don't even know the management of your business partners? Shame on you." And you dare to say cut ties and don't attend the wedding to the parents of the man Patricia is going to spend her life with? Utterly disrespectful." David's words enveloped me, Richard, and Patricia. President William and Elizabeth looked as if they'd been plunged into despair. A week later, I ran into President William at a board meeting at my father's company. He gave me a slight nod and moved away, avoiding me. I watched his retreating back and made up my mind. For Richard and Patricia's sake, this relationship couldn't continue as is. After the meeting, I stopped President William, who was hurrying home. President William, we're renting out my shop this weekend to celebrate my son's wedding. Would you like to join us? Well, I don't think it's appropriate for me to. Don't say that. It's a good opportunity to mend fences. We had issues at the wedding, but why not start fresh? Why would you? After all that happened. I was hurt, but Patricia apologized first. I want those two to be happy. We share that wish, don't we? Will you join us? After some thought, President William nodded. I'm truly sorry. I'll join the celebration. On the day when President William and Elizabeth walked into my lunch shop, Richard and Patricia stood up to say something. But before they could, I stepped forward to greet them. Thank you for coming today. It's a bit cramped because we've set up the dining area where we usually display lunch boxes, but let's enjoy ourselves. What's the meaning of this? Patricia glared at her parents. Patricia, I invited them. We can't continue like this. We can't forget what happened at the wedding, but we can make better memories from now on. But also, you can't just sever ties with family. I have a request too, okay? Elizabeth, thank you for raising Patricia to be such a wonderful person. I said such terrible things. It's because Patricia, who met Richard, is wonderful. I learned from Joseph that you have to express gratitude. It took time, but the tension between the newlyweds and their parents eventually eased. Now, we all enjoy a meal together once a month. Elizabeth even started buying lunchboxes from my shop. Today, as always, I greet her wearing the apron Richard and Patricia gave me. Welcome! All to bring smiles through cooking.
I'm Karen, 27 years old. My husband Steven is the same age, and we got married last year. We both work full-time. I'm a nurse and Steven is in pharmaceutical sales. We met at a happy hour event organized by a co-worker. I love a good drink, so that evening, the after-work cocktails tasted especially good. We had crossed paths before, but that night was the first time we really talked. Our drink preferences clicked and we hit it off. Every time we met, it was fun and comfortable. So it didn't take long for us to start dating. On my birthday, Steven confessed his feelings and we officially became a couple. Our favorite dates involve finding hidden gems that serve great drinks. I love wine while Steven is into sake. Our differing tastes actually make it fun as we get to teach each other new things. As our relationship progressed, I started thinking about marriage. That's when I learned about Steven's background. His parents divorced when he was young and he never knew his father. He was raised by a single mom and they're very close. Steven has never moved out of his family home. Is that a flaw or does it show how much he values family? I tend to get blinded by love, and back then I saw it as a positive trait. Steven is kind and incredibly handsome. I couldn't find any flaws. I felt so lucky to marry the perfect man that it scared me. I had no idea that a terrifying married life awaited me. Before the wedding, I often dined with my mother-in-law. She would always tell Steven, "Karen is like a daughter to me. Don't let her get away. Marry her soon." I always told Steven I felt happy hearing this and looked forward to becoming family. Steven, who's great with people, also had a stellar reputation with my parents. Everything went smoothly and we got married. Neither of us likes being the center of attention, so we didn't have a big wedding. After the wedding, Steven moved out of his family home for the first time. However, concerned about his mom, we chose an apartment just a 10-minute walk from his family home. In hindsight, that was a mistake, but it's too little, too late now. My mother-in-law, who used to treat me like a daughter, changed after the wedding. She started treating me like a mortal enemy and began visiting daily. I gently told Steven I appreciate that your mom visits every day, but it's hard for me to relax. Could you ask her to come less often on work days? Stephen responded, Why? We're family now. Mom gets lonely. She loves to talk and hates being alone. I wish you would be more understanding. This is my home too, and I can't tell her something I don't believe. If you have something to say it yourself. I won't. Stephen doesn't accept my opinion. I was surprised by his unexpected response. From that day on, Stephen would get moody whenever I mentioned anything about his mother. I started to hold back to avoid arguments. My mother-in-law took advantage of this. Before I knew it, Stephen had given her a spare key. One day, I came home to find mother-in-law cooking in our kitchen without asking. I was shocked to find her in my space, so my tone got a bit sharp. What are you doing, mother-in-law? You can't just come in here without asking. Mother-in-law shot back, What's going on with your fridge? It's practically empty. I have never seen such a lifeless fridge. Do you even cook? Don't tell me you're always buying deli items. I couldn't hold back anymore. I shop for fresh ingredients daily. I've heard your fridge is always packed like a traffic jam. It's impressive you can manage that. I just bought ingredients today. Sure, we have deli days, but I also cook to save money. And by the way, deli food these days is pretty good. Don't you ever try it? Mother-in-law wasn't backing down. Oh, listen to you. I would rather not have Stephen eat food when we don't even know who made it. This is what happens when he marries an incompetent wife. I should have taught him to be more discerning about women. Sparks were flying between us. Once I started airing my grievances, I couldn't stop. Do you see the shopping bag, mother-in-law? There's not a single deli item in it. I'm busy, so could you please not get in my way? You're not even a guest anymore since you let yourself in. Mother-in-law stormed out, her face red. I'll tell Stephen about this. I had more to say, but she left. I knew I was in the right, although it made me uncomfortable. I wasn't wrong. I shook off the bad vibes and started cooking pot roast. Then Stephen came home, his face a splitting image of his angry mom. What did you say to mom? She called me crying. How could you be so cruel when she was just trying to help because you're busy? I was baffled. First off, breaking into someone's home isn't a surprise. And if it is, then burglars should be forgiven if they call it a surprise, right? This happened because you gave her a spare key. She could have come when one of us was home. It's not only unnecessary but also intrusive. What about my privacy? I have no intention of apologizing. Stephen looked shocked and one word, Please, can you two just get along? He retreated to his room without eating dinner. I hoped this fight would make him more considerate. For the next few days, we barely spoke. I couldn't stand the tension, so I brought it up. What do you want to do going forward? I don't want a relationship where we don't communicate. Let's talk. Stephen finally said, Mom's remorseful. She was crying yesterday. Worried you would never forgive her. The root cause was me giving her the spare key. I'm sorry, Karen. I didn't care about mother-in-law. As long as Stephen understood, that was enough. My weakness showed and I forgave him. Even though I know in the back of my mind, my fault is that I forgive it. Stephen immediately called mother-in-law. She came running, happy to be summoned. I had a bad feeling, but I was tired of fighting. If she would change her ways, fine. As soon as mother-in-law saw my face, it was as if a switch had been turned on. Oh, I'm so relieved. I thought Karen would never speak to me again. I know I overstepped and I promised never to do it again. Mother-in-law started talking in a voice as sweet as if she were talking to a cat. For some reason, I just have a bad feeling about it. She then pulled out a mysterious bag from her purse. I met an old friend from college yesterday. She's unbelievably youthful and beautiful. She gave me some Chinese tea. That's her beauty secret. I thought I'd share some with you, not that you need it. I had a bad feeling, but felt awkward refusing. Stephen whispered, just have one cup of tea with her. I'll make sure she leaves as soon as possible. So, wanting her gone, I agreed to drink the tea. I have always enjoyed Chinese tea and it's popular at my workplace too. Mother-in-law quickly poured hot water into the tea pack. This tea is supposed to be good for your skin and boost female hormones. You guys are thinking about having kids soon, right? If you like it, I'll tell my friend to get some for you, she said, placing the cup in front of me. The aroma was a bit unusual, but I took a sip anyway. It tasted strange, but I downed it, thinking it was just a new flavor. However, my bad feeling came true. I woke up in the middle of the night with stomach pain, feeling half faint. By the time I felt better, it was already morning. There was no doubt about it. The only thing I had consumed that Stephen hadn't was the suspicious Chinese tea. I told Stephen about it, but he didn't take me seriously. Karen, that's a terrible accusation. Mom brought the tea to make amends. You're making it sound like she poisoned you. Don't you feel ashamed? It's probably just an upset stomach. Mom would never do something like that. Stephen wouldn't believe that I was being malicious, but without evidence, I couldn't press the issue. Still, I've been wary of anything from mother-in-law since then. Just before Stephen's birthday, mother-in-law called. Karen, I'm cooking for Stephen's birthday. You can come or not, it's up to you. You're busy, right? Maybe you should take some time to refresh yourself. She was planning to celebrate Stephen's birthday without me. I've been scared to eat anything from her since that day. And homemade food was out of the question. But I was planning to spend Stephen's birthday together, so I felt upset. I thought we would spend his birthday together since we are newlyweds. I assume you have celebrated with him every year until now, so from now on, it's my turn. Before I could finish, she cut me off. Anyway, I want Stephen to come home. You don't have to come, Karen. We can celebrate your birthday next month, okay? I decided to leave the decision to Stephen. That night, he said, Did you hear? You're free to do whatever you want that day. He chose mother-in-law over me without hesitation, and I was getting fed up. On Stephen's birthday, he was in high spirits, and it made me feel sick. My feelings for him started to wane. He seemed to enjoy celebrating with just his mom becoming more of a mama's boy, and they started dining out together more frequently. I'm busy with work and can't focus on that all the time. A month flew by, and it was my birthday. We usually celebrated at our favorite restaurant. I assumed this year would be the same, but Stephen surprised me. Mom wants to celebrate your birthday with us. She would be happiest if you two got along. I was so shocked, I froze. Stephen, still in high spirits, didn't notice. I said, I wanted to celebrate just with you, Stephen. We weren't together on your birthday, so let's spend mine together. For some reason, Stephen thought I was being polite. No, you don't have to hold back. Mom offered, so it's fine. He just didn't get it. I had no choice but to be firm. Stephen, no offense to mother-in-law, but I want to spend my birthday just with you. I want to go to our special restaurant. Then Stephen suddenly got angry. Don't waste Mom's kindness. You're heartless. Why haven't you noticed that Mom didn't invite you to my birthday? Just do as I say. It's already a hassle. I was done arguing. And then came my birthday. Instead of a restaurant, we were at home, and of course, mother-in-law was there. Neither of them seemed interested in my low spirits. I started to get angry as I saw them enjoying themselves in the kitchen. Then the lights went out and the cake came in. I was angry, but the cake helped me cool down a bit. Before blowing out the candles, mother-in-law announced she had a gift. I bought a wine worth $5,000 for your birthday celebration. Let me uncork it right away. The packaging looked worn and the cork was crumbling. Is this what they call vintage? Mother-in-law poured a generous amount of wine into my glass. Even in the dim light, I could see the wine was cloudy. Memories of the Chinese tea incident came flooding back. I took a small sip. What is this? I spat it out immediately and turned on the lights. I turned the bottle of mother-in-law's so-called $5,000 wine upside down in the kitchen sink. Wine flowed down the drain. Stephen quickly grabbed the bottle from me. You're terrible. Apologize to Mom. What do you think you're doing? I saw what it meant to have a face filled with anger. Stephen was glaring at me. I poured wine into the glass Stephen was holding. Can you drink this then? Stephen looked puzzled but stubborn. He took a sip. At that moment, mother-in-law shouted, Stephen, don't drink it! Too little, too late. He spat it out immediately. What the heck is this? Mother-in-law took the wine away from Stephen. A shocked Stephen asked, Mom, where did you buy this wine? We need to file a complaint. This is fraud. It's spoiled. Mother-in-law looked guilty and said, That wine was just sitting in the back of our kitchen. It's 50 years old. I heard on TV that it gains $1,000 in value every year. Vintage wines are properly stored in wine coolers. Upon closer inspection, the cork was more damaged than I thought. It was cloudy and smelled like mold. Even Stephen couldn't hide his surprise. What bothered me was mother-in-law's don't drink it. I suspect she knew it was spoiled, but she would never admit it. I couldn't forgive mother-in-law for this. Can you please leave? I can't keep my composure. Just get out of my sight. Even as I said this, mother-in-law kept making excuses to Stephen. I felt invisible. But even mother-in-law, clearly uncomfortable, made a hasty exit. After she left, Stephen said something unexpected. Mom doesn't drink, so she wouldn't know. Good thing we didn't give it to anyone else. Even after all this, Stephen defended mother-in-law as if it were an accident? At that moment, my feelings for him cooled. My resolve solidified against Stephen, who defended mother-in-law despite what she had done to me. I had been turning a blind eye to his excessive attachment to his mom. I want a divorce now. I presented Stephen with divorce papers I had kept just in case. He was speechless. When he asked why, I said, ask yourself, do you know how much I have put up with? I have reached my limit. Then without asking, on top of that, he deeply apologized, saying, I won't do it again. You're the one for me. He started confessing to multiple affairs. I had suspected infidelity, but I was shocked to hear about 4 different women. I had no more doubts. I decided to divorce him. There was no need for a private investigator. Evidence of his affairs was plentiful. During our discussion, he suddenly blurted out, you'll regret divorcing a cool guy like me. Stephen says like a fool. I was disgusted at my own foolishness for ever loving such a man. Multiple affairs and being a mama's boy were more than enough reasons for divorce. To avoid complications, I decided to hire a lawyer, even if it would be expensive. Stephen initially resisted the divorce, but eventually gave in, perhaps realizing the extent of his mistakes. He went back to his beloved mom. Later, it was revealed that his affair was with a co-worker and he was demoted as a result. Unable to be away from his mother, Stephen quit his job. He's apparently job hunting, but rumors spread fast. He can't find a job in the same field because his workplace affair became public. Still, unable to separate from his mother, he ended up working part-time. Given his arrogant and unreliable nature, it's unlikely he will keep the job for long. I need him to work steadily to pay me alimony. For now, the payments are coming in without issue, so let's call it good. I later found out that mother-in-law, who had acted so high and mighty, was a hoarder. Stephen's family home was literally a trash place. No wonder they never wanted me over. Eventually, the stench became a nuisance to the neighbors and the police had to intervene. The thought of drinking wine from that house still makes me sick. Stephen can live in his trash place and work his random part-time jobs with his beloved mother-in-law for all I care. I may have returned to my old life, but I'm happier just not being tormented every day. Stephen won't be coming to my workplace anymore, so that's a relief. In hindsight, Stephen had good looks but nothing else. The fact that he's making the alimony payments is a plus, I guess. Breaking up made me realize this: love is indeed blind. I have learned my lesson this time. I'm putting romance on hold for a while. I want to focus on my career.
Do you even know your place?
Well, but I had to work late today.
What's the point of a curfew then? Using work as an excuse?
My husband yelled at me, as he usually did. The man who once rescued me from my loneliness through marriage. But years have passed, and that man is long gone. Still, I kept believing, hoping he'd someday return to the man he once was. Finally, I realized how wrong I was.
Fine, have it your way. I can cut ties too, you know. I am not your slave.
My name is Penelope. I'm 30 years old. I met my husband Alexander 3 years ago. I was grieving the loss of my parents at the time. Invited by a coworker, I reluctantly agreed to go to a party. That's where I met Alexander, an IT professional. He too seemed less than thrilled to be there. I didn't go out of my way to strike up a conversation, but that night, maybe because of job stress, I drank more than usual. Feeling unwell, I stepped outside for some fresh air. Wow, I definitely drank too much. As I rested outside, a voice from behind asked,
You okay?
I turned to see Alexander. Sorry, I just needed some air. I can take you home if you're feeling sick. Well, but... It's fine. Here, let me take your bag. I've already settled the bill. Wait, then let me give you the money for... It's fine. Can you manage a taxi? If not, we can walk. I was easily smitten back then. His kindness got to me, and before I knew it, I was in love. Days later, as thanks for the ride home, I invited him to dinner. From there, we grew closer and eventually became a couple. When I missed my deceased parents and shed tears, Alexander was always there. With his gentle smile, he'd say, "Your tears won't bring them back, Penelope." I know that. If you keep crying, your parents won't be at peace. But... No matter what, I'll be by your side. You're not alone anymore, Penelope. So please, no more tears. Alexander. I'll always be here, Penelope. How comforting those words were. Since then, I stopped crying over my parents. I looked forward to sharing many more moments with Alexander. As we headed to City Hall to register our marriage, I felt certain of this. We met at a reluctant party, yet that led me to Alexander. However, I was yet to discover his true colors, the true nature of my favorite Alexander. The first hint came about 6 months into our marriage. That's when Alexander suddenly said, "Hey, Penelope, could you cover a little more of the living expenses starting next month?" What? Pay more? Did something happen? Well, you see, starting next month, my dad and mom asked if I could send them some money. Hold on, isn't Lucas a government worker? He has a stable income. I don't fully understand it either, but it seems they're struggling financially. So I want to chip in a little for them from our living expenses. Is that okay? When Alexander suddenly made this request, I was quite surprised. That's because his father, Lucas, has been working in the public sector for over 30 years. While his salary isn't exceptionally high, it's not so low that they would struggle. Are my in-laws really struggling so much that they would ask their son to contribute? Despite feeling uneasy, I couldn't flat out say no to Alexander's request. Reluctantly, I decided to pitch in an extra $500 for the living expenses next month. 2 months later, incredibly, Alexander made another shocking proposal. Hey, Penelope, could you add another $500 starting next month? Wait a minute. This time, even I had to call a timeout. That would mean I'm paying almost all our living expenses. So, is that a problem? I'm having a hard time financially because I'm sending money to my parents. I get that, but an extra $1,000 is too much. I want to save some money too. Save? You can save all you want in the future, but I can only support my parents now. Are you going to refuse that? I was struck dumb by Alexander's terrifying outburst. I had never seen the usually calm Alexander so furious before. Without showing me any mercy, Alexander fired off harsh words. Hey, are you even listening? Seriously, I've always thought this. Whenever something bothers you, Penelope, you go silent. Alexander, I married you, a woman who's not particularly outstanding. Why can't you even listen to your husband properly? No, that's not what I meant. Don't get into the details. All you need to do, Penelope, is listen to what I say. If you have time to argue, get the cleaning done instead. Alexander violently grabbed a can of beer and hurled it towards me. It hit my head hard, scattering the beer all over the floor. Pointing at the mess, Alexander yelled, "Clean that up, you slowpoke!" I couldn't say anything back, left with no choice but to do as told. From that day on, Alexander's behavior grew increasingly tyrannical. 2 years into our marriage, my days were filled with misery. After Alexander started henpecking me, several rules were imposed. The first rule was that I should shoulder all the household expenses. Second, I had to adjust my schedule to Alexander's. Third, I had to see Alexander off and welcome him home every day. Additional rules included doing the cleaning and laundry daily, preparing meals based on caloric count, and being home by 6 p.m. regardless of how busy work was. The rules were almost suffocating. I also work full-time, so it's impossible to devote all my time to Alexander. Still, I tread carefully, not wanting to upset Alexander. Some may wonder why I don't just get a divorce. Some people may think so, but I still believed Alexander would return to the kind man he once was. Then, one fateful day, after finishing dinner, I took a shower once I confirmed that Alexander was asleep. I had been instructed to shower only after he was asleep, so this had become my routine. Upon returning to the living room, I noticed an envelope sticking out of Alexander's bag. What's this? Normally, I would never touch Alexander's personal items, but that day my curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself reaching for the envelope. The front read, "Pay stub," with Alexander's name on it. On a whim, I pulled out the pay stub and checked the amount. The figure was unbelievable. $1.4K? The pay stub showed that Alexander's take-home pay was only $1.4K. With 22 workdays in a month, this amount didn't make sense. You're kidding, right? Alexander's salary is only $1,400 a month? That can't be true. Not when he's working in IT. I've been covering all the living expenses for a year and a half because he said he was supporting his parents. But was this the real reason? The next day, I decided to talk to Alexander directly about it. So I didn't prepare dinner and waited for him to come home. As soon as Alexander got home, I got right to the point. "Hey, Alexander, can we talk?"
What? Where's dinner? I told you to have it ready by the time I get home.
"I need to talk to you about something important."
Something important?
Is it true that you're working in IT, Alexander?
What are you talking about?
I saw your pay stub, Alexander. A take-home pay of $1,400 a month. Doesn't make sense for an IT job. Frustrated, Alexander let out a deep sigh.
Why are you snooping around my stuff, Penelope? That's creepy.
I'm sorry I snooped, but why lie?
I didn't lie. You must have seen it wrong.
No, I saw it clearly. Your salary is, well, $1,400.
Ugh, I've had enough. I'm going out for dinner.
With that, Alexander stormed out of the living room. The front door slammed shut, jolting me back to reality. What's going on? Why is he hiding his income? We're supposed to be partners in this. Something needs to be done. So I decided to call my in-laws and get to the bottom of it. Hello? Olivia, my mother-in-law, answered cheerfully. Hi, Olivia. Sorry to bother you this late. Can I ask you something? What is it, Penelope? Olivia didn't sound like she was struggling. She sounded as cheerful as always. Confused, I asked her directly. Are you and Lucas having financial issues? What? Why would you ask that all of a sudden? I was just wondering, are you thinking of sending us money? No, it's just that, don't worry. Lucas has a good job and we're doing fine. We have plenty saved up. What about the money from Alexander? We have never received money from Alexander. He never even mentioned it, unlike you, Penelope. Alexander had supposedly been sending money to them for a year and a half. That's why I had been covering all the living expenses. But Olivia says they've never received anything. There's no reason for her to lie. Finally, it hit me. Alexander had been lying to me all along. But why? The next day, I took an afternoon off from work and headed to the private investigation agency I had researched beforehand. I requested a background check on Alexander. 2 weeks later, when I went to pick up the results after work, the investigator looked at me with a serious expression.
Penelope, I'm sorry to say that Alexander does not work for an IT company.
I figured. So, where does he work?
He is a janitor. Sure, he may clean for various companies, but he's definitely not an IT professional.
I see. My bad feeling had turned out to be true. Alexander had lied to me about where he was employed. I sighed deeply, and the investigator made a bitter face. What's wrong? I asked, and he began to speak slowly.
Well, Penelope, there's one more thing we need to talk about.
One more thing?
Yes. Actually,
what he told me was a devastating truth that I did not want to hear. I took the envelope with the investigation results and headed home, still in shock. It was 7 p.m. When I opened the front door, Alexander was waiting with an angry look on his face.
Do you even know what time it is?
I'm sorry, I had to work late today. It was clear Alexander was lying. Even though I was the one at an advantage here, I found myself apologizing out of habit. Seizing the opportunity, Alexander raised his voice.
Do you even know your place, Penelope?
Today was overtime, so it can't be helped.
What's the point of a curfew if you're gonna use work as an excuse?
An excuse? That's not what I meant.
What about my dinner? I'll divorce you if you neglect your duties.
In that moment, a dull pain ran across my cheek. Alexander had slapped me. And that was the last thread of patience I had snapped. Deception, control, insults, and now violence. How much more will it take for him to be satisfied? I'm not his slave. You can be happy with Alexander. That's what I thought when I got married 2 years ago. I had believed, up until now, that the man who once saved me from loneliness would eventually change. But the Alexander from back then was no more. Or perhaps he was never real to begin with. None of it mattered now. It's time to put an end to all of this. I took a deep breath, looked straight at Alexander and said, Fine, I'll leave.
What? Penelope, are you serious?
You're talking about divorce, right? I'll go, so you can do as you please.
Hey, what are you talking about? Divorce was a joke. I'm not going through with it.
Clearly, he hadn't expected me to agree to a divorce so easily. Alexander started to panic. Ignoring him, I continued. Joke or not, I'm serious. I'll pack my things, so don't get in my way.
Wait, I'm not agreeing to a divorce.
You don't have to. You'll eventually have no choice but to agree.
What does that even mean?
Cutting Alexander off, I held out the envelope I'd received from the private investigator. Inside were multiple photos proving Alexander's affair. His face drained of color as I placed the photos in front of him. It was time to deliver the cold, hard truth. These are pictures of you cheating, right? You lied about work, about sending money to your family, and you even had me covering our living expenses so you could support your mistress.
That's not it. Penelope,
What do you mean that's not it? I've already confirmed with Olivia, and these photos were taken by a professional investigator, you know? Alexander was clearly stumbling over his words. I was fed up with him. He was only thinking about saving his own skin. Time to put an end to this farce. I declared loudly. Who knew you'd turn out to be such a lowlife, Alexander? I was a fool for being deceived, but what you did is unforgivable. Lying, manipulating, cheating. You're the worst of the worst. How can you even live like that?
Please calm down, Penelope. I'm sorry.
Sorry? You expect me to forgive you now? All this time you've acted like a hand-picked husband while manipulating me like I'm some kind of maid.
I'm sorry. Can we start over?
Start over? Get real. You've got nowhere to run, Alexander. I'll make sure you hit rock bottom. Prepare yourself. My words must have hit home. He sank to his knees, groaning. Ignoring him, I packed my bags and left the house. I got a lawyer and divorced Alexander. I demanded $30,000 from him and $15,000 from his mistress, both as one-time payments. He tried to get financial help from Lucas, but was of course denied. It didn't end there. He got cut off from his in-laws' house after I told them the truth. His mistress dumped him too, and now Alexander had no one left to turn to. All that awaited him was a lonely, miserable life. But I had no sympathy for him. He got what was coming for looking down on people. As for me, I moved into my company's dormitory and started a new life. Commuting got easier, and it was comforting to have friendly colleagues in the same dorm. Though I now had a divorce record, I had zero regrets. What's more important is that I can live as myself. Being married isn't the only path to happiness. From now on, I'll live a life that I can be satisfied with.
Seriously? You're such an annoyance. Maybe it's about time you kick the bucket, huh? Narrowing her eyes to glare at me, my daughter-in-law Kiki, along with her mother Sierra, spat these words in my face. Even my precious grandson Hank, whom my late son left behind, joins them in pointing at me and laughing. Seeing this unfold, I felt like I had reached my breaking point. Why keep people around who wish you gone? They're not family. They're nothing. The weight I'd been carrying in my chest seemed to lift, leaving me feeling oddly liberated. Well then, leave. We want to live just as a family. Sierra shouts at me, sounding like a villain from some story. Hank repeats her words like a parrot. Seeing the two of them so pleased, I could only sigh. Despite their continued jeers and insults, I could only muster a dry laugh. All right, I said, retreating to my room immediately. And so I began to plan my revenge against these strangers who felt entitled to stay in my home without a second thought. I'm Amy, 72 years old this year. I had been living with my son Wendell's family, but since he passed away, I've been living with his wife Kiki and grandson Hank. But it seems they don't appreciate this at all. Whatever goodwill I've shown them has been met with indifference, if not outright malice. Amy, I'm sorry. Work will keep me late again today. Don't worry about it. Just do your best at work. I'll look after Hank. Kiki often comes home late from work. Feeling sorry, she informs me as such, and I always try to encourage her. With Kiki so busy, my days consist of looking after Hank. That said, Hank is a middle schooler now. He should be able to take care of himself. Hey, Grandma, why do you cook such terrible stuff? I'm sorry, but you're growing. I make sure to cook enough. I don't want it. Not in the mood to eat this crap. Maybe Hank has felt lonely since his parents often work and leave him home alone. I was having a hard time with Hank, who was in the throes of teenage rebellion. It didn't help that he was disappointed his grandmother was the one taking care of him. He would often ignore the meals I prepared, and I even found out he was tossing the lunch boxes I made for him in the morning. He wouldn't lift a finger to do his laundry, but if I took it upon myself to bring it to his room, he'd snap at me. Don't come into my room without permission. I couldn't be too firm with him. I felt guilty for not allowing him to be indulged by his parents and having him endure instead. Yet, there was another factor that was making his behavior worse. Sierra, Kiki's mom. Really, Amy? You're feeding my grandson this junk? I'm sorry. Hank, Granny brought you some of your favorites. Go ahead, eat up. Awesome. You're a lifesaver. Sierra would come by unexpectedly, barge in without so much as a greeting, and shower Hank with gifts she called souvenirs. Even though they were Hank's favorite foods, they were often high in calories and greasy, just making his dislike of vegetables worse. Even if I hinted at his picky eating habits, Hank didn't listen. He had a powerful ally in his maternal grandmother. Sierra loves to criticize me, taking any opportunity to say whatever she wanted, making both Hank and herself feel better in the process. At times, she would even badmouth Wendell, who had passed away, leaving behind not just me, but our kids and his wife. Hank probably preferred Sierra over me, who nagged him daily. I was growing increasingly frustrated with Hank's worsening attitude and Sierra's enabling behavior. Still, I kept my composure, telling myself it was only once or twice a week. But that composure broke when Kiki made a certain suggestion. By the way, Amy, my mom's coming over next weekend. Just a heads up. Oh, she gave notice this time. Usually she'd just come over saying we're family and doesn't need to ask. Upon hearing what I had to say, Kiki frowned, but didn't object. Being a single mom and looking after a child at that age can't be easy, so I never insisted on moving out. I thought I'd be doing everything I could to help both of them. My mom said she's okay with us living here together. What? Sierra's going to live with us? Yeah, Hank already adores my mom, so it should be fine, right? Well, about that, I was at a loss for words. From Kiki's perspective, her own mother was more trustworthy. Even so, I'd been the one taking care of Kiki and Hank all this time. I was quite shocked that such a decision was made without even discussing it with me. Ignoring my reaction, Kiki continued. I didn't even ask for Amy's opinion. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. Oh, please clean out Wendell's room. My mom is pretty efficient. She'll throw things out immediately. I felt dizzy hearing her say this. She wanted to carelessly get rid of the memories in my late husband Wendell's room. The thought alone made my blood run cold. Rushing to Wendell's room, I started moving his belongings to my room, feeling a chill creeping into my heart. Sierra moved in before I knew it, and in no time, she acted like she owned the place. I had left some basic furniture in Wendell's room, thinking she would need it. But one morning, she had it all thrown out as bulk trash. Who would want to use a bed that belonged to someone who's dead? Exactly. I told Amy to clear out the unnecessary stuff. Maybe her ears aren't the only thing going bad in her old age. As Sierra moved a bed into Wendell's room, a bed that looked out of place, she said this. The way Sierra claimed the space as her own and disregarded Wendell, along with Kiki and Hank's support for her, was something I couldn't forget. Soon after Sierra moved in, I lost my place in the house. Kiki was often absent due to work. Hank refused to eat my cooking. and Sierra catered to Hank while treating me like an enemy. Enough of this. Learn something from Granny and cook something edible. Hank, you need to eat some vegetables too, or it's unhealthy. Don't worry, Granny knows exactly what you like. I'll make lots of it for you. With a smirk, they looked my way. While cleaning up the salad that had been knocked off the table, I pretended not to notice their contemptuous gaze. While Hank and I were sitting on the sofa happily eating the pizza that had been delivered without me noticing, I sighed. No matter how much this was for Hank's sake, being continually disregarded like this was disheartening. On top of that, feeling despised and being verbally abused made it hard to feel any love, even for my beloved grandson, left behind by my son. When did caring for Hank become more of an obligation than a pleasure? Reaching my limit, I took the opportunity to talk to Kiki when she came home late at night. I saw this as my last chance before our family bonds disappeared completely. However, Kiki was unaffected by my words, and she said, "So you're saying you don't like how my mom behaves?" You know, I thought living together in this house was a favor from me to you all. Can't you at least show a little appreciation as a family? Huh, is that so? I was the one who offered to continue living together after we lost Wendell, the breadwinner. I was also the one who decided to support Hank, who was emotionally unstable after losing his father. If family sentiments are absent in all of this, it wears down my soul. I tried to make Kiki understand my feelings, but she just grunted and said, "I'm tired," then returned to her room without responding. The next morning on Kiki's day off, I was struck with the final blow. "Mom, listen. Amy doesn't like your attitude." "Oh, really? Maybe she's just lonely since Hank has been taken away from her." Suddenly, hearing this out loud, I was taken aback. While calling for Hank, they continued talking, glaring at me with malice. "She says this house is only running because of her generosity. What a high and mighty attitude." I wonder what she's trying to say. Does she not understand she's not the only family member here? Seriously, it's infuriating. Maybe you should die soon too, like someone's son. Kiki spat out these words, with eyes wide open, glaring at me. Hank, who had been laughing at the sight, repeated Kiki's words like a parrot. "Die soon? Ha! That's harsh. Whoa!" "Hank, don't laugh so much. You'll make Amy feel bad." Witnessing this scene, I felt as if I'd reached my breaking point. What had I been thinking, serving these people all along? Any feelings for my precious grandson, left behind by my son, had long vanished. As they say, people who wish for your absence aren't family or anything of the sort. A weight lifted from my chest, and I felt clear-headed for the first time in a while. "What's with that look? Shocked to find out we're not family? Have you finally lost it? Fine. We're going to live as a family from now on. Get out." I can only muster a dry laugh in response to the three people mocking and berating me. Understood," I reply, and quickly retreat to my room. I start planning my revenge on these people who have overstayed their welcome in my home without a second thought. First, I call a moving company to get all of my belongings out of this house. The movers gladly accept the job. As soon as I hang up the phone, they arrive and start loading my things onto the truck with efficiency. Wait, why are you taking the furniture and appliances too?" "Because most of the things in this house were purchased by me." "You're the only one getting kicked out. You should leave them." "No, thank you. I have no intention of leaving anything for strangers." Maybe it's because I've always been accommodating. But the three are surprised by my calm response. But they were the ones who hurled unspeakable insults, proving they're not family or even decent human beings. I have nothing more to give them. When we started living together, I had said I wanted to save money, so I purchased most of the furniture and appliances. That includes Kiki's favorite microwave and Hank's go-to sofa. I have them promptly packed by the movers. As my belongings are being carted away, the three continue to snipe, albeit with unpleasant expressions. Well, fine. I'm actually glad you're getting rid of that old furniture. Makes things feel fresh. Granny, why don't you buy me a new bed while you're at it? Sure, let's get one bigger than before. I ignore their incessant sarcastic remarks and tape up the final box. After glancing around our empty house, apart from their rooms, I gave a cheerful, well then, turned my back to the three of them, and left. How wonderful this home is now that the nuisance is gone. You don't have a home to return to anymore. Spend your lonely retirement alone. Ignoring their noisy complaints, I couldn't help but chuckle. Do they really think this is over just because I walked out with my bags? I looked back once more at the three optimistic faces, wondering how they'd react to what was about to happen. A soft chuckle rose within me as I thought about it. Wait a minute, what did you do? The angry voice came over the phone a few days after I had left. After leaving, I quickly completed some paperwork. One afternoon while relaxing in a hotel, as I searched for a new place to live, I got a call from Kiki, who should have been working. Oh, took the day off. That's not the point. What did you do to our house? Kiki's words prompted me to respond with a deliberately feigned, "Ah," ignoring her shrill insults thrown at me as if she was under some kind of pressure. I casually handled the situation and answered her question. I sold the house. It's not my place to live anymore. You sold it? Our house? The house Wendell bought? It's not our house. It's my house. Did you forget about the asset division? When I said that, she fell silent, apparently having forgotten entirely. The house had been under my eldest son's name, but during the asset division, Kiki dumped all the messy paperwork on me because it was too much of a hassle. I agreed to her audacious request to transfer the house title to me in exchange for all financial matters concerning her and Hank. Realizing she had just now caught on to the facts, she started making frantic excuses. That's not what I meant. What I do with my house is my business. Please make moving arrangements soon. But then we'll have nowhere to live. Not my problem. That's someone else's house, as far as I'm concerned. As I was leaving Kiki, who had shouted loudly that it's more comfortable without the nuisance, had lost her enthusiasm and was mumbling softly. Behind her, two others seemed to have overheard. I heard a voice scolding her. What are you going to do now? Why not ask Sierra? Heck, even your parents' old house, where you lived before, would do. Well, that house is even older than this one. There's no way I can go back there. Then find an apartment or something. Can't we just have this house? Are you kidding me? You want the house for free. Use the inheritance Wendell left you and figure it out. I gave her a piece of my mind, then chaos erupted on the other end of the line. Everyone was talking at once, making it impossible to understand what was being said, so I hung up the phone. For a while the calls kept coming, but I ignored them. Then a call from Hank's number came through. Yes? Grandmother? I'm sorry. I want to live with you as a family again. I see. I promise no more complaints. The food you cook is actually really good. Hearing that now only sounds like you're trying to butter me up. His words, contrasting sharply with his previous rough attitude, made me waver for a moment. But then I remembered the day Kiki said, Isn't it about time you died? With a horrifying smile, and Hank laughed loudly, as if mocking me. At that moment, I felt that he wasn't Wendell's child. Hank is Kiki's child, not Wendell's. I couldn't see any trace of Wendell in the shallow way they changed their tune, and groveled the moment they faced trouble, despite wishing me gone. Live happily with your family of 3, I said. Wait, please, I apologize. Please forgive me. Some mistakes can't be undone. Teach that to your mother and Granny, too. And with that, I hung up again. Calls from Kiki continued, but eventually ceased when she seemed to give up. Finally, everything was over. I folded my hands. in front of a photograph of Wendell that I had placed on the table and reported to him in silence. A few days later, apparently the three of them had no option but to move back to Kiki's old family home after their house was put up for sale. According to a tearful phone call from Hank, Kiki had been recklessly spending Wendell's inheritance and living it up. Their financial recklessness led to constant arguments with Sierra, making every day stressful for Hank. "So what have you been up to?" "I don't feel like I belong in this house, so I've been hanging out at friends' places. I wish I could live with Grandma again." "Try not to be a burden to your friends, okay?" Hank keeps playing the victim card, but he makes no effort to appreciate his current family. Instead, he's just trying to win me over. It's clear he hasn't learned a thing, which I find frustrating. I'm not moved by Hank's appeals and choose to ignore them. Kiki, too, has called me, her voice laced with complaints about being yelled at by Hank and not being able to stand Sierra's lectures. Both Hank and Kiki only tell me things that are convenient for them, but I couldn't care less. "Amy, can't we be a family again?" "You seemed pretty happy when I was out of the picture, didn't you?" "Well, that was a poor choice of words." "You wanted me gone just like Wendell, didn't you? I can't be family with someone who says things like that." She stomped on my goodwill, calling it condescending, so I have no intention of doing anything more for her. Fed up, I decide to ignore calls from both of them. Then a call comes in from an unknown number. Answering it, I find, unsurprisingly, that it's Sierra. "Amy, being stubborn won't get you anywhere." "What are you talking about?" "Planning on living all alone? You can still come back, you know, just apologize." "Apologize and become what, your servant?" She still can't humble herself to apologize to me. They try to lure me back with their self-centered talks, but I can only laugh it off. "Don't you want to live with your cute grandchild again? Don't you regret abandoning your family?" "Regret it? Not a chance." "You're the ones who cast me aside, saying I'm not family. Maybe you're the ones with regrets. That's why you're calling me." With that said, the call ends abruptly, amidst shouting on her end. Looking at the call ended on my phone, I once again affirm that I did nothing wrong. I've done all I can in that house. Hank is old enough to know right from wrong. If they had even offered a single apology to Wendell, I might have reconsidered. But all they did was try to win my favor. So let them enjoy their real family. I sold the house and moved into a new apartment with the money. In my sunny new room, I offer a prayer to Wendell's picture. Whether they're real family or not, caring for others is what really matters. Smiling, I update Wendell's photo on how things have turned out for them. I don't have to worry about anyone else or be unnecessarily considerate anymore. Living alone in my comfortable new home feels incredibly refreshing.
When someone passes away, they live on in the memories of those left behind by living honorable lives and by raising Lucia and Chloe, who carry Lane's genes. We pay the greatest tribute to the departed. That's what Mom told me. Yeah, thank you. I'll do my best. Even though Chloe and Lucia are just in middle school, to have lost Lane, the person who helped me recover was Mom, who lives with me. It might sound like Mom is this calm and wise person, but hey, what's this bitter paste? Mom, you're making weird health foods again. I grated the entire clementine, skin and all. The skin has nutrients, so eat it all up. What? Try it yourself. Chloe, fix your bed hair. Never mind that. Eat this, Chloe. Your bed hair is cute. Our typically noisy mornings are happening again today in this home. My name is Caitlin. I'm 44 years old. I lost my husband Lane, who was 2 years my senior, 2 years ago. A health checkup revealed a disease, and things went downhill fast after that. Mom, who was already living with me, saved me from my grief. Her comforting words soaked into me, perhaps because she had already lost Dad. Thanks to her, I have been able to recover this quickly. Mom moved in after Dad passed away. Lane had suggested that she live with us, saying it would be lonely to live alone. Since the kids were grown, we had a good system. Mom handled the housework. I worked part-time and Lane was a full-time employee. Everything was going well until then. Losing Lane suddenly was unimaginable. He was a kind and sincere husband. I had no complaints about him, but there was an issue. It was a concern I had even before Lane passed away. And after his passing, that concern grew even larger. The root of the problem is Lane's sister Neva. Neva is a home economics teacher. Her husband is an older social studies teacher and they have a daughter and a son. What a perfect family! But the competition from this perfect sister was incredibly intense.
I love my job as a teacher. It gives my life purpose, but you're just a part-timer. You'll never know the joy of a fulfilling career. Relying on Lane for income, huh? And your mother handles the housework? I can't even begin to relate to your situation. I'm juggling with both work and family perfectly.
Those condescending words stung, but they were directed at me, so I took it. Yet it didn't stop at me. When I grow up, I want to work at Hasbro because I like Sparky, my child declared. The next time we saw Neva and her family, her kid chimed in, I want to work at Disney. Walt Disney was... Neva cut in.
Disney is a much bigger company than Hasbro, you know.
When my mom sewed a beautiful outfit for my child's graduation, Neva retorted,
My kids wear Gymboree. We're all about the brand. You can't even afford that, can you? Homemade? That's laughable. Brand name quality is a different league.
Every chance she got, Neva made it a competition, and today she took it to the max.
How about you move out of this town?
She texted via WhatsApp. I couldn't believe my eyes.
Why is your mother living in my younger brother's inherited house? We need to talk about this. I'll come over.
What? Trembling, I showed the message to my mom, and there was more.
I'm on my lunch break now, so it will have to be after my overtime. Unlike part-timers, I have extra hours,
she texted. For now, I tried to think calmly about how to handle Neva's unexpected gripes. Why should we move? We can't just... Don't worry, my mom interrupted. If you're this stressed, maybe you're low on vitamin C? Try some grated clementines. Not the time for clementines, Mom. Struggling to put aside the clementine discussion, I spent 4 agonizing hours thinking before Neva arrived. What to do? I can't come up with a good idea. I couldn't think of anything other than I don't want to move. Meanwhile, my mom was busy filling a storage container with a new clementine pasta recipe. She wasn't even thinking about the situation. If I don't do something, we're in trouble. I was sweating buckets, unaware at the time that my mom's hand was subtly trembling with anger. I would later find out that. But for now, Neva arrived just before 8 p.m.
So here's the thing,
Neva began as she sat at the table.
My mom is getting weaker, so she can't live alone anymore. We're thinking of moving her in with us, so we're going to close out both my mom's apartment and our own place and move here. Look, my younger brother's passing is the reason my mom got weak in the first place. Isn't it all caused by things that happen in your family? My mom gave birth to my younger brother who left this inheritance behind. Legally or not, doesn't human decency suggest that this house should go to my mom? It's odd, isn't it? It's strange enough that you're living off my younger brother's inheritance, but it's even stranger that your mother lives here too. I am talking about what's morally right.
What? Add my biological mom to our family and not look for a new home? Why should we give up our home? Is it our fault that your mom is getting weak? Living in my husband's family home goes against human decency. That's some logic. As I was dumbfounded by Neva's bizarre reasoning, I heard a voice say,
What What kind of reasoning is that? Turning around, there stood my mom, defiantly holding a bowl overflowing with clementine pasta. She slammed the bowl down on the table between me and Neva. Maybe you're not getting enough vitamin C in that crazy head of yours, my mom declared, thrusting a spoon into the mound. The pile of clementine pasta collapsed, splattering onto the table. Neva let out a small gasp. The tension was anything but normal, and I reflexively tried to stop my mom. Mom, but she wouldn't be silenced. I have been wanting to say this for a while. You keep saying awful things to my daughter. And what was that about in the WhatsApp messages today? I have been on the verge of exploding since you got here. Mother... So what if you are a teacher? The one who fell for our daughter and proposed in the first place was your younger brother. Mother, if you're going to keep calling her a part-timer, then go say it directly to your younger brother's grave. Criticizing his lack of judgment. Mom, would you just shut up for a moment? I have something to say. My words directed intermittently at Mom were interrupted as soon as they left my lips. Mom just wouldn't stop talking. I get it. Your mother-in-law got sick because she lost her son. I have sympathy for her. When my husband passed away, I was devastated too. But why are you asking my daughter to move out of the home she cherishes? If my presence is the issue, I'll move into your house instead. Then you will have two people, one being your younger brother's mother-in-law to take care of. You would get even more attention that way, wouldn't you? And hey, why not invite Mariko from down the street? She's not getting along with her daughter-in-law either. We could all live in your house. Who the heck is Mariko? Both Neva and I are stunned by the mention of a name we have never heard before. And aren't you just high on your perfect shelf? You pretend to be all about your job, but you have been neglecting your family. Take a look at your kid's latest school report. She's been absent a lot. I bet you don't even know because you leave for work before she heads to middle school. Your older daughter isn't even attending middle school, let alone any tutoring centers. I have seen her coming out of the arcade downtown. When I asked her about lunch money, she said she takes it from your wallet. How can you say you're responsible at work when you can't even keep track of your own wallet? I'm shocked that Neva's daughter isn't attending middle school, a fact I wasn't aware of. But even more shocking is that Neva, her mother, didn't know. Even more unbelievable is that Mom knows all this. However, my surprise is likely dwarfed by Neva's own disbelief. Neva seems lost for words. Kids don't have to go to middle school, you know. It's just one part of society. Maybe she would have been happier at another school. She even opened up about why she stopped going. Have you ever listened to what your children have to say? Neva turns bright red. It's written all over her face. Why does she have to listen to this condescending woman? And with that look, she blurts out what everyone was thinking. I haven't. But do you really have to point that out? I thought she was doing fine because she didn't say anything. So let me ask you, do you think you could do better if you were in my shoes? Balancing work and spending the little time I have at home with my children? I heard from my younger brother that you just sew in your spare time. Oh, I probably couldn't. Mom easily admits she couldn't do what Neva does. Neva visibly recoils, taken aback by the straightforward response. I tried my best to create an environment at home where we could talk about anything. In return, she opened up to me. You, on the other hand, are so obsessed with keeping up appearances. You made her say she wanted to work at Disney, a place she doesn't even want to be at. You even made her memorize quotes from the founder. You know why she refused to go to school? Because she thought if things keep going like this, I'll end up at a worse high school than Chloe. What did you say when you saw her test scores? She's going to a middle school with a lower rank than Chloe. Are you trying to shame me? Then you muttered something like, I can't rely on her anymore. If she's going to lose, I have to find a way to get them out of the neighborhood before high school entrance exams. I got it now. I heard both sides, yours and hers, and I'm convinced your daughter isn't your accessory. She's trying to live up to your expectations. But all you see are the grades. You don't offer advice or say, I'm here watching over you. All you care about is your image. She reached her limit. She can't see a future no matter how hard she tries. What's worse, she has a parent willing to harm other families just because she can't achieve. Do you think there's a middle school student who wouldn't break under those conditions? That's why she couldn't go to middle school or the tutoring center anymore. I felt like crying too. Her kid is just too pitiable. But Neva always had too much pride. You really are a nag using information about my child's refusal to go to school to threaten me? Who do you think you are? Then, taking a deep breath, my sister-in-law screamed, You old bat! Ding dong! Ah, a visitor! In this tense atmosphere, I let out a goofy voice. It's not just a visitor. Come on in. Mom picks up a spoon, still dipped in the clementine pasta, then eats a bitter spoonful herself. She looks like an artisan deep in thought, pipe in mouth. Meanwhile, I head to the front door. I open it. Good evening. What? Standing at the entrance is Neva's husband. Neva is a bit older than me, and her husband had a receding hairline. Your mother invited me. May I come in? Sure. Still not understanding the situation, I led Neva's husband into the living room. Sorry about this, I borrowed your phone book and called him for the 4 hours until this woman arrived. I was worried about what you would do, Mom says, brushing aside the matter of the phone book. Well, then, Mom directs me to take a seat and offers the chair next to her to Neva's husband. Once seated, she takes control again. Say what you just told me, but here and now, she demands of Neva. Neva is at a loss for words. Fine, I'll say it for you. Listen up. Your wife called me an old bat. Neva's husband is left slack-jawed, and understandably so. Suddenly summoned here and told just this line, anyone would be confused. I decided to explain on her behalf. It all started with a question. Why is your mother also living in this house that was the inheritance of my younger brother? Neva had stormed in and shouted, It's ridiculous that you're living here. I want to bring my mom here, so please leave. During the conversation, she looked down on me because I work part-time. She also pushed her unrealistic expectations onto her own child, causing the child to stop attending school. Realizing her child wasn't meeting her expectation, she schemed to kick us out. That's what led to this eviction drama. I explained all of this succinctly. Neva's husband listened and nodded. After hearing everything he said, Neva, first of all, you said you wanted to move, but I didn't know you meant this house. Why didn't you tell me? The idea of kicking everyone out to move in is absurd. And as a social studies teacher, I have to say, his tone hardened. Old age is a testament to knowledge and experience. It's unacceptable to belittle that with disrespectful words. He continued, How many people have you sacrificed and looked down upon to maintain your own pride? You have looked down on my sister-in-law who's a part-timer while boasting about your own job. Our daughter is so stressed out she can't even go to middle school anymore. Our house is a mess because you don't do any housework. But I thought it was my responsibility since I chose to marry you. That ends today. You have been too full of yourself. Finally, he deeply apologized to us. As a husband, it's my last role to apologize on behalf of my wife. I'm sorry, and thank you for telling us about our daughter. I heard Neva sobbing in the background. My mom then said to Neva, The clothes you are wearing now, they're from Gymboree, right? I used to sew for Gymboree. I never knew Mom worked for a major apparel brand like Gymboree. I found out for the first time too. The clothes, she said, were specially made were actually made by Mom. No wonder the clothes Mom made were always so durable and beautiful. In the end, Neva and brother-in-law got divorced. Brother-in-law took custody of their 2 kids. After taking custody, he moved, and Neva left her middle school teaching job. now uncomfortable in the small community where her false facade had been peeled away. As for me, I continue to live a joyful life every day with my energetic mom and my cheeky two daughters. Mom, what are you up to now? I'm making a bitter melon pasta. Stop, please. Thank you, Mom. You will always be a hero to me and my daughter.